We were just giving some introductions as we were stalling, playing for time, waiting for you.
Let me,
So Paul,
Terry.
introduce yourself.
Allow me.
Oh, sorry to be late. They lied to me and said it was in the
Now that Paul is here, we're ready to start. I do not think that Ron is going to show up. Do you know?
Ron Turner?
No, he could not make it.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, okay. So we will discontinue waiting for him. My name is Earl Kemp. I am a First Amendment convict, and these are my friends. I've already told you this is my #1 son, Earl Terry.
He thinks he's Charlie Chan. I am #1 son.
Willie Best. This is Paul Krasner. We almost met in 1962, Paul and I. I was chairman of the World Science Fiction Convention, and Paul was part of Hugh Hefner's entourage, who did a walkthrough of the convention during Theodore Sturgeon's guest of honor speech. I did not get to meet Paul at the time. He was with Hefner and Murray Fisher and a few eye candies from the centerfolds. Besides that, Paul has quite a honorable history of being anti-establishment, and anybody who is that way is a friend of mine. That's what got me into a whole lot of trouble. And this is a good friend of mine. This is Tom Gitchoff, who, at one of the most trying points in my life, was a very good friend who helped support me very much. But it was mental and emotional support when I really, really needed it, because the feds had me pretty fucked down. It was pretty terrible for a long time. I endured 10 full years of total surveillance and for no reason at all. Never could figure out why. It wasn't just me. It was everyone who was in the industry it was known as erotica at the time. And the more they attempted to harass us, the worse it got, the stronger the pornography got. It wouldn't have been that way without their insistence. All of us, we had a full 10 years of total surveillance. It was incredible. There was no reason for any of it. Many, many millions of dollars spent on my behalf trying to protect me from the U.S. feds, and spent by the U.S. feds trying to put me in jail. They succeeded, but they did it awfully crooked. It's a whole lot better, to be honest. But there's not too much of that in Washington.
Okay, my end here, what I contribute and bring to the table. While this was going on, Pop kept all the correspondence, all the court transcripts, all the trial briefs, up to and including the brief to the Supreme Court and the response from the Supreme Court. I've gone through this step by step, detail by detail. I'm the fact checker. I am the historian. I have the dates and figures, and not trying to step on anybody's toes at any time, but it became important because precisely what Pop was just saying. How the feds manipulated the various laws in order to make the trial happen and the conviction out of it. And it reads at times like a Lenny Bruce trial, where the strange, odd, even perverse nature of the people testifying and the feds, in their view of what was happening, twist things around. And to sum that part up before we go into some of the details, the oddest conclusion I came out of it, because it's right there in the record, is from the Supreme Court itself. Even on the basis of law that they had previously determined and stated in past practice, recent cases, when this trial came before them, the consensus opinion of the majority in their 5-4 decision was that we can make up the law. We are the law. Guilty, guilty, guilty. And they say that in the transcript pretty much. And I brought some of this to read from it because it's unbelievable that the level of corruption in our government is so explicit at the time, and I suspect still the same. Among some of the jiggery-pokery tricks that were pulled is a character whom a lot of you don't know, but it's certainly my head villain in all of this, followed by his henchman, a man named Charles Keating. Charles Keating used...
You're wrong, Terry. The principal culprit was William Rehnquist.
Ah, right. Yes, okay. He wrote the majority decision on the Supreme Court.
Not only that, before he created the court case, he staffed it. He wrote the script.
That puzzles me a bit because by my okay, some of the facts. Let's get some of the facts out there so people have a context for all of this. Yes.
I'm sorry to say this, but I'm coming in without having read anything online, so let's say I don't know what you're talking about. Somebody's just told
Right.
me.
Let's give you some context.
Yeah, I need to know the context. I understand this is a pornography type trial from Deep Throat. Was that it?
No, but it happened at the same time. And that's part of the quandary. Okay, some quick facts and then details backwards because I don't want to go over long. I want everybody to chat.
Here it is.
No, you're absolutely right.
Here it is. Coming up.
Good.
Throughout, beginning in 67 through 68, the Supreme Court tried various pornography cases, from everything from use of the males to video, movies, Deep Throat, and it was very encouraging for a while, some of the laws, that's the key point, as they built stacked the deck of the laws. Well, the consensus appeared to be trending towards a national standard of what was obscenity, and defined as what was obscene was what would appeal to the prurient interest of a normal person. That's the statute. And that was trending and looked really good and very promising. But the secret hand behind all of this, the stacking of the deck, was the males. While they were being socially proactive and moving forward in every sense, especially with for instance, the movie Carnal Knowledge. If any of you know the movie Carnal Knowledge, it had just come out, had explicit heterosexual scenes in it, and it also appeared before the Supreme Court, and it was tied to this obscenity case. They ruled in favor that it was okay to view it, but they were against putting a picture of a heterosexual couple having sex in a brochure using the males. Back through 67, 68, into 69, they stacked the decks, making this odd conundrum where it seemed that everything pornographic was moving forward, free love, everything moving forward, while at the same time locking down the males so that the use of the males was the criminal offense. And after all the indictments were handed down, it was the use of the males that kept coming up. You see, I have the envious position of looking at all the transcripts so I could see the final one where the telling points that finally bubbled up and after all the flack is out of the way, something not transparent at the beginning. And for my money, it was the local San Diego State Court judge, Gordon Thompson, who did it. And the males will come back several times because the males plague all of this industry and other industries too. So it's like they give with the right hand while they're just waiting for you to use the males with your left hand, and then we're going to take you to task because the use of the males is a hard and fast, evident thing. We don't have to judge whether or not the item is obscene. Now, and this is what they kept saying, it doesn't matter anymore that the brochure advertising this book or the book itself is obscene. It's the use of the males for things that we don't even have to judge that are obscene. It was the use of the males, period. Without having to judge...
Terry, slow down. Too far. Too far. You're going too far. The book was never considered to be obscene.
Exactly. Mhm.
Never called obscene. Never suppressed in any form.
Exactly right. They wouldn't come to a conclusion on it.
And the people who received the brochure in the mail were people who had specifically requested such material and signed attesting that they were adult. However, not one single one of those people showed up at the trial.
Yes, it was a farce.
They were all postal fronts, fake outs, and the people who did show up at the trial were things like their wives,
Yes.
or some of their children who happened to open Daddy's mail and got terribly shocked at the stuff that Daddy's
In the
getting.
briefs to the Supreme Court from Stanley Fleischman, who was a First Amendment litigator, they're exactly correct. And they kept coming back to the basic fact. You use the mails. Use of the mails is criminal. Here's their sentence. It was the use of the mails. They wouldn't come to a conclusion on any of it. And they kept even saying, it doesn't matter if the book is obscene or not. It doesn't matter. It came down to this brochure that they mailed advertising this book. Again, back to the mails. And they even said, point blank, doesn't matter if the brochure is obscene or not. You use the mails. All the officers of the company had their names on paperwork. One for paying for it.
Terry, you're still only touching the surface. You aren't going subsurface.
Well, I'm not trying to. I'm just setting the scene. You guys are the subsurface.
There was an extreme close connection between Nixon and Thompson. And
I don't know this.
And also Copley, the local newspaper magnate, who even on Nixon's last day in the office ran puff pieces about how good he was when the rest of the world knew he was a major criminal.
Yes, by then Watergate had happened.
And not only that, Nixon came almost every weekend to San Clemente when Judge Thompson would go there, and the two of them would discuss the trial in minute detail, and Nixon would tell him exactly what he wanted the judge to do.
Oh, yes. Well, that explains something. One of the fascinating
and
maneuvers...
Thompson was the only judge in the district who would meet with Nixon. All of the rest of the judges says, no, 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 that's unclean hands. We cannot do that. We cannot discuss ongoing cases with you, however much you want to. And every day after the trial, Nixon would phone Thompson for the daily update on how it went that day. And I had access to all those phone calls.
At every step of the way, there's different points of view.
Nice to know.
But this is provable from the transcripts. I brought one of the transcripts with one of the final ones, where Judge Thompson reviews the sentence after the Supreme Court. And he does say these things. Gordon Thompson, the local judge, San Diego judge, the first court, the Superior Court.
Everyone associated with that trial, everyone federal associated with that trial, themselves went to prison shortly.
Yes, that was the Charles Keating story.
Except Nixon, who pardoned himself ahead
yes.
of time. And
The deck was
Buchanan, who wrote all of the words for Charlie, what the fuck his name was, the Citizens for Decent Literature guy. Patrick
was what we
Buchanan
call a full court press to
wrote
get
all
these
of this
guys.
stuff for Nixon. Buchanan was a Nixon speech writer. Nixon assigned him to cover Charlie's ass. And who? There was one other. Oh, of course, Rehnquist, who did the whole plot, who wrote it all. He didn't go to prison. He was the only one. He went to the Supreme Court. He wound up being the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, who personally had ran this whole thing from the ground all the way through the end. And there should be something called a conflict of interest when a person who you can't be both. You can't be the good guy and the bad guy at the same time. And Rehnquist was, between his dope being passing out and his being put through cleansing trying to get him back to a rationality that he never made. What a terrible fuck up he was. And he really screwed me up my whole life, and the whole life after that. As a matter of fact, when this thing was all over and I was finally released from prison, I had 3 years of total blank. I couldn't do a thing. I couldn't be a passenger in a car. I couldn't drive. I couldn't work. I couldn't think.
The indictment that we're offering to society is that they don't look at collateral damage, the effect on the people that have been falsely prosecuted. And there's much more to this prosecution, and the families involved. Our family, Bill Hamling's family, the other, Shirley Wright, Dave Thomas, the 4 officers at Greenleaf Classics, the world's largest independently owned and operated adult book publisher in the country at the time of their indictment, 4,000 titles under their belt when this came about. Part of the backstory is, from day one, there seemed to be a pending altercation between Hamling et al. And the government. Bill Hamling, in his own words, writes an interesting story about back in the day when he was pals with up and rising Hugh Hefner, who came to his house one day and mapped out Playboy and said, "How would you like to be my partner?" And Bill said, "Oh no, you'll never make any money with that magazine." And of course, once it took off, Playboy took off right away. Bill said, "Maybe there is some money in adult publishing." So he started what was called Rogue magazine as a competitor and another player in the marketplace. Immediately thereafter, once again, they were using the mails, the government, the mails as a foil to stop both Playboy and Rogue. How it was maneuvered, it was maneuvering. It was something that only Bill could say, or Hefner. But they ended up using Rogue as the victim of their, let's stop these naughty magazines being mailed, and took Rogue to court. In Hamling's words, he thinks it was because he was small potatoes and Playboy was big potatoes, so he didn't have the big pockets, so maybe if they cut him down to size, they'd stop Playboy. Bill Hamling hired the company law firm of Abe Fortas, before Abe Fortas became a justice on the Supreme Court.
He was never justice on the Supreme Court.
Abe Fortas?
Was he?
Yes, absolutely.
It was.
Okay, there's
Absolutely.
a big fuss about it, but
Before he
He's one of the few Supreme Court justices that we bribed. I
You're
know
starting to get the
he was
story
the
now.
Supreme Court. He got $50,000 on his word that absolutely nothing would ever happen to us if we gave him the money. That happens regularly. He wasn't the only one. We also paid off John Kennedy.
Junior or the big one?
Jack.
This isn't a story, Pops the Bagman.
No, it wasn't a political donation. It was a fucking bribe.
But didn't they call it a
But
No,
it's
not
what-
back then. They
it's
didn't
what
have
they
to do the
demanded.
dance.
We didn't offer it.
But this, you see how this started the tale in 57. Then, because they did not win, that was one the government did not win. Playboy stayed in existence, but they captured the market. Rogue folded. About then, Bill Hamling was approached by a couple of science fiction writers that had this great idea to make this new enterprise. And since they were prolific writers, it was compelling, and Bill was the right guy to bring it to, and moved away from the magazines into paperbacks. Well, shortly after they got into the paperbacks, they were busted again for 7 books that they published. And once again, the government fumbled with the litigation. Years went by, but it was always hanging over the firm's heads until they busted them in 1970, and then they dismissed the pending case because they had a real good one and the better case. Obviously, they were losing the one but even to the point of not being able to drain the money out of the company and halt their operation by just constant litigation. And it really reads of toying and being opportunistic by the government to not come to a conclusion on one case and just turn around and go for the next case. But that is the case. And clearly there were lots of bad blood and interactions between Bill Hamling et al. From the transcripts. That's the group of 4 partners that were busted. And they came back and were able to document all 4 on paperwork involved with the mailing. And it was just back to the mailing. For some reason they had this wild hair that, well, if we can't get them from our vicinity, or we don't need to anymore because we've changed the law, and that was part of it. We've changed the law.
Pretty stupid, incoherent.
Yeah, and
Terrible,
along
terrible
with his, what was called the Keating Five, among them was one of our recent presidential candidates, a man named John McCain, who was part of the Keating Five and rose to power by helping Charles Keating start his career as an anti-porn crusader. They built $8 billion out of investors.
And you need to point out that he turned out to be a major criminal himself.
Yes, Keating went to prison. He finally did.
All the funds from Lincoln Federal Savings
$8 billion.
to build a extremely lush resort for very, very rich people. He stole all that money.
And made John McCain a senator.
That was old people's retirement money that he stole, and then he went to prison along with all of the rest of Nixon's best friends.
Terrible people were dealing with this world, and you need to be aware. Like I said before,
He's still an honorable person, by the way,
Oh, yeah,
in Phoenix these days. Although
hey, they almost made John
Venetian,
McCain president.
The luxury resort that he was building with the stolen money, he didn't have enough money. And he ran out, and the Sultan of Dubai had to step in and finish off the project for the Republican Party.
One of the other aspects was this was also cited as a violation of 14th Amendment rights. The Due Process Clause, which loosely reads, government, state, local, federal government, from depriving persons of life, liberty, or property without certain steps to ensure fairness. And they violated this too by the creation of laws, certain laws, not hearing testimony. The trial was a farce. Testimony was prohibited by the defense. Expert testimony prohibited. There was a survey done by an associate professor of local standards, a survey which was the court standard they should have abided by. They went out to the community here in San Diego, surveyed 1,000 people or more, to ask them to define what was obscenity, back to what appeals to the prurient interest. This was the standard that the local court was only entitled to use. But even on day one, Gordon Thompson, the judge, wanted to apply the national standard, which was just as vague. The difference being the local standard had been certified, and he would not allow this testimony. And yet, in a jury of peers, it's the jury that should make the conclusion as to guilt. And they were not allowed to hear what the local standard for pornography and obscenity was.
Let me interrupt.
Away from there.
Throughout the trial, it was miraculous the way some things happened while the trial was ongoing. Tom Kitchoff was very instrumental in that, from the San Diego State University Law Department, and my number one total support was Jack Haberstroh, also from San Diego State University, who spent lots of time trying to keep me from going insane.
Didn't work.
Yeah, right. He packed the house at almost every court session. It was full of students from San Diego State. So did Tom. Get your help. They sent all their students there, and they assigned them they assigned them the trial as part of their ongoing studies, and the students were there en masse with copies of the book, and during breaks in the court.
That was the textbook.
During breaks in the trial, the students would line up with the bailiffs and the court reporters and the people from the other courtrooms, and they would all get in line, and they would all come and ask me to please sign their copies of the book.
This is phenomenal. What then
After the trial was over, certain members of the jury even contacted me and arranged to meet with me privately and secretly so I could also sign the jury's copies of the book.
Remember, it was never obscene. So what then developed is President Johnson, while he was still in office, created a commission. A group of people from various walks of life gave him $2 million and said, go out and determine what's going on in our country.
Terry. That's a commonplace. They all do that. Obama's done it. Every one of them does it.
Right.
It doesn't pop up until about 8 years after,
Exactly.
after they get out of office.
Right. When Johnson was out of office, Nixon fluffed the deck, and people came and went from the commission, and Charles Keating was put on the commission as the ringer to shut it down. Yet, nonetheless, even with Charles Keating in place, he was unable to shut down the commission's report, the majority report. Remember, we abide by majority report in every instance, in any situation, except when it's inconvenient for those who have the power. Well, the commission's report was inconvenient. They said that we should legalize it in this country in every way, every fashion, anything, just like they have in Europe and Denmark, which was one of the models at the time. Well, Nixon didn't like this. I have articles at the time where Nixon is quoted as saying, so what? Well, he sent his henchmen here to San Diego in March of 1971, which was shortly after this book we're talking about was launched. Advanced copies were made available to various publishers. So they had a little heads up on what this report was going to be. There was a Scholastic Press that actually produced a copy of this report. They're the first edition if you collect these things, but it was not illustrated. Pop's company went forward with an illustrated version using material that the commission had reviewed as complements to the text. And that actually came out in court. The need to, just like in porn at the time, movies were required to have a plot. Well, pornographic pictures were required to have text adjoining them. And this became an issue because they made a brochure advertising this book, sent it out through the mails, and the brochure that went out through the mails was lacking the companion text, so it was just pictures. And that was one of the substantive points over their conviction, that there was no text to the brochure, so the brochure was just nasty pictures. The rest was stacking.
Terry, there were 3 versions of that brochure.
Yes, there's this more on this brochure. Key point, obviously, was everything in the indictments fell apart. 21 mailed them out, and that was it. That was right then. They violated the law, and they pretty much kept coming to that point. And nothing else was germane. Just they used the mails, mailed the brochure, that's it, go to prison. And that's pretty much what everybody came back to, including the Supreme Court.
Yes, and every person who complained about the brochure never received it.
Like I said, the transcript for the original trial with some 15 volumes, a monstrous amount of testimony that nearly impossible to wade through to come up with the technical briefs. And yet the points were never in argument. It seems sad, too, in hindsight looking at this, because as time went by, you can see in the legal briefs launched that Stanley Fleischman, who had many times appeared before the Supreme Court, he was during the 70s, he was a preeminent First Amendment litigator. He had been there many times. He knew his citations, academic legalese into these transcripts, but kept coming back to the main points. And some of these main points were flaws in jury instruction, limitations on providing adequate defense. But here's the key issue about this brochure, what Pop was talking about for 3 brochures. When they decided to do this book, they created a brochure. Pop left the country, and while he was gone, Bill Hamling, his partner, said, well, I don't like this brochure. I'm going to create a different one. And affidavits, testimony, all this was brought into the court trial because they were trying to sever themselves from the trial. Bill Hamling, strangely enough, was this very stand-up guy, and in his affidavit to the court said, I did it. No one else did anything. It's all me. He tried to do that. Initially, through the first court, they denied the affidavits, including my father's affidavit, to stay this. They would not allow, Gordon Thompson would not hear this testimony. Back to providing a defense, infringing on 14th Amendment rights to provide an adequate defense, and there it is. When Bill Hamling, the owner, operator of this company, said no one else was responsible, I did it all. And they said, well, we're not going to listen to what you have to say. So a new brochure was made, mailed out, and it was the bad one that got it. And yet they kept coming back to this. And why wouldn't they listen? It was pretty clear cut. So the first trial went on and on and on, starting in 71 and rolling around after almost a year and a half in trial here locally. In February of 72, they were sentenced. And then the bad times started. First, they had to get out of jail. Posting bonds and bail to get out of jail. Not a pleasant experience for any of you who have never been in a jail. I have an enviable position. I worked with them.
I didn't post any bond in jail.
Oh no, Bill posted it for you. I have the facts and affidavit signed by Bill Hamling. Yes.
He should have.
The sentencing still hadn't occurred. Mike, yes.
I just had a question. I don't mean to interrupt, but I just had a question, something I was curious about. It's just that for Paul and Earl, when I was reading in the account and all the different people in the Nixon administration that were, taking what they imagined was the high horse, and Keating and all these other guys to denounce pornography and obscenity and all, and then all these guys, well, except one who got pardoned presidentially, ended up in jail as various forms of fraudsters and criminals themselves. And I just kind of wonder what you would think to see these guys who have been taking this supposed moral high road and attacking you personally and things you were involved in, and they end up themselves as exposed as
How about that?
criminals.
How about that, Mike?
That they were subsequent, they were later that they got busted.
Yeah, but almost immediately.
Yeah.
Yes, almost immediately, yeah.
And one of the worst culprits, of course, after Nixon was Mitchell, the Attorney General of the United States.
Even his wife had nasty things to say about it.
Lawyer, criminal instructions, and he definitely went to jail, and he definitely needed, and that brings up another significant hero, Martha Mitchell.
Yes, the wife of, yes, she ratted him out. She saw that he was
She ratted
corrupt.
him out. She ratted Nixon out. She told everybody all of their criminal plans and everything, and they decreed that she was a helpless drunk.
Tried to institutionalize
and they
her.
shipped her off to obscurity and then sent in Mitchell's prison. And she was the true hero.
Now, as part of
Not only Martha, but we had numbers of very important people in Washington who were on our side, and they were.
Well, you infringe on one freedom, you infringe on all of them.
They were the people who kept us informed at all times. They were the people who told us exactly what Mitchell and Nixon were doing before they were doing it. And I had an unbelievable connection. The chief clerk, Schwarz chief clerk, and Schwarz was the chief judge of the district. His chief clerk was a personal friend of mine. He was specifically himself in charge of every single thing that came into the courthouse for any single one of the judges. He handled it. He handled every phone call. He knew exactly when Nixon called. He would tell me almost daily updates about what was going on behind the scenes. It was pretty difficult to endure.
So the day came in September 1972 when they were finally convicted on various counts. The jury came back. Sentencing hadn't occurred yet, but you can derive sentencing from the counts and the statutes that apply to the counts.
February 7th.
Yes. Count 1, conspiracy. Guilty. Counts 2 through 14, advertising brochure was obscene. Mailing the brochure, and then just mailing the brochure. The jury was split on them. But count 1, the conspiracy count, came back to haunt all of them. Because of it, Bill Hamlin got an extra year on his sentence because he was the head conspirator. Pop also was convicted of the conspiracy. Because of the way San Diego courts operate, he got a year and a day on that count. And the day was so that the local government doesn't have to pay to house you in jail. It's mandatory for people sentenced to the local jail who receive a year and a day. That day makes you spend it in prison. So they were already set Pop up for prison, not jail, not funding the local jail.
Slight difference, Terry. At that point in time, in the federal system, federal convicts were the personal property of the convicting judge.
Oddly, they call it an adult
3
sentence.
months and 1 day. The judge could do anything with them that the judge wanted to do. But on 3 months and the second day, they turned automatically over to the Justice Department and got into deep shit. Now, this was all a setup from the beginning. I was told from the very beginning that I would be out in 3 months and 1 day. That Thompson.
They actually told you this.
Thompson would make sure that happened. That it would never
because it didn't happen.
Never get into the federal level. But he was still a very bad person. Thompson.
Oh, Thompson's worse than you think. I have this transcript here that we'll get to eventually. So in November of 72, they took it to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. The fix was still in. The Court of Appeals, Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, is a triumvirate. 3 judges are mandated to sit and hear testimony. For this case, 1 was sick, 1 was dead, and 1 heard the case.
And
guilty.
And one of them was an absolute standout from day one. Absolutely not. We will not convict these people. Absolutely not. Absolutely
That's
not.
the one that didn't hear the trial.
That's the one who, on his deathbed,
The death.
signed.
I have names.
Literally. And the last thing he ever did was put squiggles on paper to go along with the rest of the judges.
Yes. It was a scandal that the Supreme Court said, oh, that's okay. So they violate the code of law that they are supposed to support. So now years go on. Every time with the sword of Damocles hanging over the family that any minute they can go to prison. They're very stressful. Yet Stanley is doing his well-paid job. He's doing the dance. He's filing appeals. He's pushing the court date beyond expectations, moving it forward. But to little avail. Finally, it did reach the Supreme Court. And everybody, initially in 1970, I'm certain of this, that when they went to trial, they thought they were going to win. Case after case had been decided in favor of whoever was being litigated against. They were certain they were going to move forward and win. How their case became the one case in all of these years, because immediately after their indictment, more laws were changed, more trials were settled in the favor of whoever they thought were distributing, writing, producing pornography, movies, Deep Throat, all of that. Okay, everything was okay. It was like they had accepted the commission's report and they were moving forward with that. They weren't using the mails to try any of these people and convict them, even though that was part of their indictments. But they did insist and keep coming back time and time again. It's like Bill Hamlin, when Fortas was his attorney, irritated people, and they just decided that, well, before we're out of office, we're going to take you down, and that's what they proceeded to do, in my opinion. So 74 rolls around, they think they're going to go, then June of 74 comes up, and the game's over. The Supreme Court's ruled against them. The unexpected has happened. They're ready at that moment to go to prison. Yet now more appeals are filed, more time spent. Another year goes by, all of 75, bringing it back once more to the Ninth Circuit Court.
And Terry, stop again for just a minute. All this time, all this that is ongoing, simultaneously was the worst of Vietnam, was the worst massive riots throughout the whole United States. Agnew, the vice president, was committed to prison for some kind of crime.
Tax fraud.
The whole federal system was falling. Watergate erupted at the same time. All of those criminals out of the Oval Office. All of this was ongoing simultaneously with my trial.
It was a hectic early part of the decade. Then finally, the last appeal went through, nothing happened. They got a verdict back from the last court in March of 75, got it delayed to October, got some feedback from Judge Gordon Thompson in November that, I'm going to listen to this and pronounce sentencing on these guys, and did. And then on January 5th, 1976, at 9 o'clock, they went to prison. Months went by as they're languishing in prison. Pop had an adventure. He became the Tin Man. Editor of the Terminal Island News, Tin Man. He wanted to change it to the Terminal Island Times. I'll let you derive the conclusions from that.
Yes, I wanted to be the Tin Man.
Yes, and met Sally Moore. For those that don't know, she's the woman that tried to assassinate President Ford, and she was in prison with him and became a contributor to the magazine.
She was on my staff at the Terminal Island Times. And so was one of Charlie Manson's girls.
As they're signaling us to wrap it up.
It was co-educational. I was in Terminal Island. It was co-educational. There were lots of women there. There were lots of men there, and it was exactly like out on the street. They were.
My favorite story is the companionship between Bill and Pop while they're in prison. It's the apples and oranges story. One likes apples, one likes oranges, and even in prison together, they continue to share things. And I liked that point. Bill is a stand-up guy. Finally, in May of 76, Gordon Thompson had one last shot, and he took it. That's when our lawyers prevailed upon him to get Bill and Earl released from prison. And on March 17th, he signed May 17th, he signed the order to have them released 4 months, 2 weeks into their 4-year prison term. And they were free once again to put together the pieces of their lives.
Bill never did. Bill never got it
No.
together. I think I did. Sometimes I think I did.
It was a devastating experience. Collateral damage by a group of villains, enough villains to make movies out of, and some have.
Yes, and there's been no apologies. That's the worst piss off part.
From my point
They
of
know
view,
they did wrong.
it destroyed our family, and Bill's family, and Shirley's family, and Tom's family. This axe that they transparently had and ground in violation constitutional amendments.
The worst part was all the labels,
Oh,
all the bad,
bearded editor.
all the name calling, all the denigration, all the attempts to
Dehumanize.
yes,
And vilify.
and fortunately, I endured. They did not. I'm here. They're all gone.
So people, I hope we've tried to convey our story, entertain you, show you that whatever you think of the product, it's the freedom to produce any product that's on the table.
Okay, Terry. Now, listen. We need something out of Paul.
Oh, I'd like to come out as a heterosexual.
Oh, really?
I've kept in the closet
I
all
haven't
this time.
considered that.
You have photos?
Well, there's some parallels to your case. One is that when Ralph Ginsberg published a magazine called Eros, it turned out that it was really a harmless book, harmless publication, not even erotic, let alone pornographic.
It was beautiful.
But he got arrested because he tried to sell, to have this advertisement, a flyer go through the mails, and he went to a town in Pennsylvania, Blue Bowls, Pennsylvania, and this was
And
what
wasn't there another one from Intercourse?
and also Middlesex.
Okay. Okay.
And
For the postmark.
And this is what they got. You know, he wasn't really violating any law, but they got him anyway on that.
It's implication. It's implication. As an example, our attorney, Stanley Flashman, absolutely forbid.
And so when I went to see Lenny, I gave him an advance copy of that issue, and he looked at it and he said, "Can you get away with this? Is this on newsstands?" Because at that time magazines were using either asterisks or dashes, but I spelled, you know, I didn't want to talk down to my readership and let them guess like a crossword puzzle, or you know, if you had the first and last letters, what went in between. I just felt it would be insulting to the readers to put them through that, and I just spelled the words out. And I said to Lenny about the most recent Supreme Court decision then about obscenity was that it had to arouse the prurient interest. And Lenny said, he went to his bed that was in his hotel room, opened his suitcase, and took out an unabridged dictionary and looked up the word prurient. And it said, the first definition was to itch. And he said, "You mean you get busted for like in a novelty store for selling itching powder?" And so that night he was going to perform a town hall in New York, and he asked me to give out copies of that issue in front of the town hall, and then he brought it on stage and talked about it. And they said they would ban him from performing a town hall again. Lenny said, "No, I would have respect if they lived up to that, but they made too much money tonight." And he was right, they booked him again. The thing is that Lenny got arrested many times, 15 times in 1 year, for obscenity. And the reason was because he really got arrested was because of his routines like Religions Incorporated, and he made fun of the Pope. He had a lot of material on that, and that's what got him arrested. But there was no law against blasphemy, and so they had to use that as an excuse, and so now he broke the ice, and you don't see any comedian getting arrested now for anything they say. I think Lenny would be embarrassed by seeing how the word fuck is used by comedians as an all-purpose noun, verb, epithet, adverb, adjective. And I feel like an English teacher, you know, don't you have a bigger vocabulary? But no comedian gets busted for that now. More and more, you know, some TV stations, if you call somebody an asshole, somebody will bleep out the ass, somebody will bleep out the hole. You know, it's arbitrary choices. You can get pissed off, but you can't get pissed on. And so there are all these bizarre things. So on programs like The Daily Show, where Jon Stewart says fuck an awful lot, but they have such a little quiet little thing between it, you know. Oh yeah, well, you know, everybody knows what it is. Right. And there are little kids on my block now when they're playing, and if they want to curse the kids, they're yelling at, they say, bleep you. So it's that bizarre. The only other thing I want to mention was that at the height of the Cold War, I published a poster that said, fuck communism. And it was very confusing to conservatives because they agreed with the sentiment but not with the language. And so one student at a Midwest college held up the poster for the graduation photo of the senior graduating class. And when the administration saw that, that it was going to be in the yearbook, they said, we can't have that. And they whited out the word fuck. So now he was shown holding up a sign that said communism. And they said, we can't have that. The alumni will, you know, stop funding us. So they whited out the word communism. So now in that yearbook, he's holding up a blank sign. And people thought like he was majoring in Dada or something. But anyway, it just shows you how bizarre it is to give these magical qualities to letters. Just, you know, 4 letters that was treated like it was an enemy, or you know, the Taliban language. Anyway, that's my immediate comments.
Okay, Paul, there's one thing that I wanted to tell you before I forget. I'm very good at forgetting. We almost had an indirect contact through another route, Ken Kesey, who was a great hero of mine. I was about 4 years behind him coming along. I was always the wrong time. That's my curse. I particularly wanted to be on the Cooley Acid bus, and I was right behind him in his route across Mexico. I lived for 5.5 years in Ajijic, where the bus had stopped, and spent quite some time. That's Jalisco, Guadalajara, right? Yeah. But I never met him.
Oh, well, you missed something. He was a true... I'll give you one quick example of Kesey's personality, because people think of just the bus trip. But he had a house in La Honda, and there was like a little stream going under and a little bridge to go over in front of the house, and then there was a dirt road. and he had time's up.
Tim Powers is a friend, he'll wait.
We have to leave. All right, well, you got a couple of sentences in there?
I do.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. You have nothing to say?
Okay, well, before we go, no, you're right. Okay, where's this date? All right. I got one more thing. In 1973, this was after the trial, after the conviction, Gitch had a seminar for law people at San Diego State University, and he asked me to participate in this seminar. And I said, on 2 conditions I will participate. First, I have to follow exactly, I think it's Ray Gower, who was the guy who took over the Citizens for Decent Literature after Charles Keaton got hooked up to the federal level. And I had to follow him, and I had to be billed as a felon. And we had a little problem about that. Do you remember?
Good times.
Somebody at the school objected to me being billed as a felon, and you tried your damnedest to get it. Anyway, I was billed as a felon, and I enjoyed it very much. And I was there with all those law types that you had, and I had a great time with them. But then I had about 10 years after that locked in with all the San Diego law, the San Diego cops, the sheriff. I did all of their publications for about 10 years. This was all after I'd been convicted. And I knew more criminal cops than anybody in the county.
I probably said, here is the only rehabilitated felon I knew, right here.
I don't even know.
Thank you.
Thank you, people. All of you.